Okay, hello sa lahat. So you are viewing the lecture video on the course Readings in Philippine History with the topic Multiple Accounts to a Single Event, the First Cry of the Revolution, and the Tejeros Assembly. Okay, so for our objectives in this lecture, so we aim to examine an event through the lens of various perspectives. Hindi kasi natin may iwasan that sometimes in an event or in a particular phenomena or basically just some simple information na we can receive information coming from different sources, and sometimes these different sources would have their own perspectives. Okay, so how do we deal with information that is coming from different sources? Okay, so yun. Next objective, we will try to understand how the different perspectives affect the perception of what is true. So yun nga. So given na you have information that comes from different sources, uh, paano niya naaapektuhan? Ano yung katotohanan? Okay, so how do they affect yun nga, which is real or which is true information. Okay. Lastly, so we aim to realize that perspective of the source is important in analyzing information. So important yun. Okay. Um, so as we will get to see later, so yun nga, different perspectives does not necessarily mean na one is true or one is false or one is not true. Okay. It's just na having different perspectives allows you to view an event in different means or in different ways. Okay? Uh, Sometimes, hindi nga totoo yung iba because different ang perspective niya. But, yun nga, sometimes it's the truth based on another point of view. Okay? As what we will show or as what we will realize later on. Okay, so let's proceed. So for this topic, so we will be using two readings. Okay, first is are the accounts on the first cry of the revolution or yung unang sigaw ng revolution. Okay. The second set of readings deal with the event on the Tejeros Convention. Okay, so let's go first to the first set of readings. Okay. So we have the first cry of the revolution. Okay, so the first account is by Dr. Pio Valenzuela. Okay, so he was an official of the Katipunan. He was an acquaintance, a friend of Bonifacio. He was also present during the meeting and during the cry of the revolution. If you've read our modules, okay, if you've read the appendices, di ba, doon sa uh, the first account there. So he was there during there were meetings before the actual cry or before the actual sigaw. Okay, so he was present. Okay. Um, so the cry itself was dated by Valenzuela on August 23, 1896. Okay. Okay, so take note, focus natin dito is on the cry itself. Yung kailan nila sinigaw, mabuhay ang katipunan or mabuhay ang revolusyon. So, yun. So, doon tayo magpo-focus. Okay. Second account is by General Santiago Alvarez. He was one of the leaders of the Cavite Revolution. Okay. So, according to Alvarez account naman, he dated the cry on August 24, 1896. Ayun. So, yan na. So, we now get to see differences based on two different accounts or two coming from two different perspectives. So, kay Alvarez naman sa 24. Yung kay Valenzuela sa 23. Alright. The third account is by Guillermo Masangkay. So again, another acquaintance of Andres Bonifacio. He was a member of the Katipunan. Uh, yung sa account ni Masangkay, so how did he uh, or how did we arrive at the date August 26? So first, he was interviewed by the Sunday Tribune around the first decade of the American occupation. So yun, so sa interview, so sinabi niya that the first cry of the revolution happened on August 26, 1896. All right. So he was interviewed again by Bagong Buhay on sorry, this was not 1896, but this was during the 1570s. Okay, sorry for the error. Okay. So the interview, in that interview, so sinabi niya, August 23, 1896. So he was interviewed August 26 of natin. So he was interviewed on August 26, around 1570s. So I will uh, get back to you on the actual date. 1957 yata. Sorry, 1957 if I'm not mistaken. Okay, anyway. All right, and then again, so it was changed back by the granddaughter of Masangkay to August 26, 1896. So she cited the notes, okay, of of her grandfather, okay, the Masangkay papers. So yun nga. So it was so the account of Guillermo Masangkay was changed back to August 26, 1896. O yan. So ito naman, pabago-bago. Alright. Okay. So what are the considerations that we need to factor in? Okay. Okay. So first, what are the discrepancies? So let's acknowledge first ano yung mga differences, ano yung mga yun nga, discrepancies. So kay Pio Valenzuela, that was on August 23, 1896. Kay Santiago Alvarez, that was August 24, 1896. Kay Guillermo Masangkay, started with August 26, 1896, then to August 23, 1896, and then back to August 26, 1896. So, paano natin i-approach yan? Okay, how do we determine which is more accurate, which is the proper one? Okay, well, lahat sila, they said na they were there. Okay, another question of validity din pala yan. How can we prove that they were there? Okay, but again, so that's for a different ano. Okay. So they all said that they were members. Okay. However, out of all of them, uh, si Santiago Alvarez was a general from the Cavite faction of the Katipun of the Revolutionaries. Okay. Si Pio Valenzuela ang kasama talaga ni Bonifacio, okay, out of the officials. All right. Therefore, the closest in terms of their membership with the Katipunan, so the closest one that could be relied on regarding the account of the cry, again based on the membership, you the one that would have the highest accuracy or the highest validity would be, or the highest credibility would be Pio Valenzuela. Okay, again because of his status in the Katipunan in the revolution. Okay. Also, his presence in the meeting was verified by Santiago Alvarez. So sabi ni Santiago Alvarez, again if you've read the account, so uh, nandun si Pio Valenzuela during the meeting. Okay? All right. Now, are they not, ano yung magpapa-disqualify sa kanila? Okay? One was the nature of the source or of the account. Uh, ito yung problema kay Masangkay. So he was interviewed after, so it was around the the first decade of the American occupation. So the problem is the length uh, from the event itself to the documentation. Okay? So medyo matagal na since the account. Another medyo matagal na from the time na sinulat niya yung, or from the time na kinuwento niya yung account to the actual event itself. Another problem is yun nga, the changing, the inconsistencies. Okay? So, nung in-interview siya ulit, sinabi niya August 23. Okay? And then, tapos, binalik nila sa August 26 by citing the Masangkay papers. Okay? Okay. So, those are some of the factors that we have to consider. Alin sa kanila ang mas accurate. Okay. So, again, we're not discrediting any of them yet. So, wala pa tayong sinasabi na they are telling lies. Okay. But then definitely yun kasi yung isa sa mga factors. The the imperfect memory factor of human beings. So, syempre, habang tumatagal, di ba, you tend to forget some of the dates. Okay. So next, how were the information presented? First that we are going to consider in this factor is gaano kadetalyado. Okay? The one with Pio Valenzuela, it was more detailed compared to Santiago Alvarez. Well, mainly because yun nga, mas kasama niya sina Bonifacio or the main faction of the Katipunan. Okay? So mas detailed siya, 'di ba, in the sense na going to the place of the first cry, diba, sa bahay ni Tandang Sora. Okay? So even the events leading towards the actual event. So he had accounts. Meron din naman si Alvarez but mas detailed ang present ni Valenzuela. And in these cases, uh, the account that has the more details that were provided, mas binibigyan natin siya uh, ng priority or ng credibility. Okay, but again, yun nga, we're not discrediting the account of Alvarez. Again, he's coming from a different perspective, so it's a good idea. It's always a good idea to include accounts from other perspectives. Okay. Okay. With regards to Masangkay, so if you've read the account that was shared in our worksheet or in our module, kung titingnan mo, parang nagkukwento si Masangkay. Okay? Titingnan niyan natin how primary sources are written compared to secondary sources. Remember, in journal accounts, well, okay, it's possible na magkwento ang author, especially if the author is a well-known linguist or a well-known writer talaga. But for most cases, when you keep journals, you really just write down the important events, diba? The important activities that transpired and when they transpired. Okay? Hindi ka pa talaga magkukwento or hindi ka pa talaga magsusulat dyan narratively. Okay? Of course, again, in some cases, we're not generalizing. Di na sinasabi na all journals are like that. But of course, there's a higher probability na, especially given the time na yun nga, you're preparing for the revolution. So you won't really have time to polish your work into a narrative format. Okay? As compared to secondary sources or writings based on primary sources, yun yung mas may time, mas may chance to really polish the work into a narrative form. Okay? So again, uh, the manner in which the information was presented can also give us an idea which we are going uh, to consider, okay, as our source. Okay? Another thing about the discrepancy pala, uh, how close are the accounts on the information that they are presenting. Okay? In this case, si Valenzuela and si Alvarez are saying that the event happened on the 23rd and the 24th respectively. While si Masangkay, if we're going with yun nga, with the documented or with the cited so 26. So out of all the three, okay, by by virtue of yun nga, frequency, okay, mas lumalayo si Masangkay on the 26th. While the other two, Santiago, si Alvarez and si Valenzuela, so magkalapit, 23, 24. Malay nyo, during the midnight. But of course, again, ano na yan. Okay? So that is another factor to consider. Okay? All right. Nevertheless, well, if you're going to pour over the accounts, for the most part, they have similar, ano naman, di ba? They have similar information that was presented. Okay? So, in terms of what transpired, wala naman masyadong issue. It's just that yun lang talaga. When did the event transpire? And where did the event transpire? And sa kaso ng discussion natin, so mas focus natin is the when. Okay? All right. So these are one of the issues regarding historical facts. So because of multiple sources, it's hard to discern or it's hard to determine which are we going to use or which are we going to say is the final or is the absolute truth. Okay. All right. Now, until until necessary, hindi necessary, until the authorities of Philippine history have determined on the actual date itself. Okay, for example, the NHCP, the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, have uh, proclaimed na ito talaga ang actual date when the first cry of the revolution happened. Okay, because of the following basis, etc., etc. Okay. So we can't definitely say for sure kailan siya nangyari. Okay? That's why it's always important to, number one, cite your source. Okay? For those of you who will be teachers na maganon dito. So if you're going to say na the uh, the first cry of the revolution happened on August 23, 1896. Okay? So it's important to say to your students kailan ano yung source na ginamit mo. Okay? So it's important to say na according to the account of Dr. Pio Valenzuela, so the first cry of the revolution happened on August 23, 1896. Okay? Para hindi magkaroon ng issue with regards to your discussions, especially if you're going to be teaching elementary or high school students. All right? Because again, we're not discrediting. They were actual uh they were actual participants in the event, and we cannot really verify because, well, uh some these are some of the limitations of history, di ba? There are certain information that we can no longer verify, but their credibility is, well, is checked. Kumbaga na establish natin na, well, they are credible. They were there, they were present at the time. Okay? But yun lang talaga, these are the things that we need to consider. Okay? So in terms of the discrepancy, magkakalapit ba sila to say that the event actually happened? So in terms of the when, yun yung problem. Okay, who is more accurate? So based on the background of the authors, who can we look into more, or who can we lean into more, diba? Okay, based on their backgrounds, who were they, ano bang ginagawa nila, anong standing nila, anong position nila at the time. Okay, and how the information was presented. Okay, so was it presented chronologically, was it presented narratively? Okay, uh, with the manner of the details presented, magkakasunod-sunod ba, or do they follow a particular pattern, and did the pattern uh, or is the pattern logical, diba? So those are the things that we can consider. Okay, now in the end, so ano sasabihin natin, is it 23 or 24, is it 26? So again, yun nga, you need to cite sino ang account na ginagamit mo, or kaninong account ang ginagamit mo. Okay? Because you can say that the event happened on 24 according to the account of General Santiago Alvarez. Okay? In that sense, that's true. Diba? And hanggat hindi na prove na the account is false, then that is true. Again, the importance of citing who or from whom did you get your information. Okay? Secondly, di ba, all things considered, di ba, how important really is determining the event. Di ba? 23, 24, 26, can be 25. Kasi when you present this, especially for the future teachers out there, especially for yun nga, what's more important is the essence of the event. Okay? Why do we commemorate, or why do we include this event in the lessons, or why do we need to remember this event? Okay. Aside from the Independence Proclamation, the first cry of the revolution is the earlier event that manifested the desire of the Filipinos to be independent from Spain, para humiwalay na sila. Okay? The proclamation of the independence, the proclamation of independence is the official. Kasi yun nga, natatalo na yung mga Spaniards, so independence is assured. Kaya lang, yun nga, we know what happened afterwards. Ito, the first cry of the revolution, basically hindi pa. Baga, hindi pa nag-start ang fighting between the Spaniards and the Filipinos. Okay, so we're not yet sure. Okay, are they going to win? Are they going to attain their independence? So hindi pa alam 'yon. But the importance is the sentiment is there. The desire to be independent is there. Kumbaga, it's either we're going to attain our independence or we're going to die trying. Okay? So, that is the clear manifestation na we no longer want to be a colony of Spain. We want to be an independent nation. Okay? And again, that desire, that manifestation of the sentiment is important in the birth of the nation. Okay? Kasi yan na sinasabi mo na gusto mo nang maging independent. Sinasabi mo na that you want to be a separate nation. Okay? We don't want to be a nation that is under another nation. Okay? So the sentiment is, again, an important uh, event. I mean, the manifestation of the sentiment is an important event to be commemorated. Okay? So you can just say now, by August of 1896, the latter part of August of 1896, the Filipinos' desire to be independent, to be a separate nation was manifested. Okay? That's why this is another important event to be commemorated. Okay? Next, event that we need to consider or that we consider in this discussion. Okay, so you have the Tejeros Assembly or the Tejeros Convention. All right? So this was ito yung event na pinagtatalunan ng dalawang factions, ng dalawang Cavite factions, Magdalo, Magdiwang. Okay? To have a government, to have a reorganization of the government. Okay? Because the Katipunan cannot be considered, yun yan, sabi nga nila, government. Okay. So we have three accounts. One from Artemio Ricarte. So he was an official from the Magdiwang faction. Sorry. He was uh, proclaimed as a secretary of the convention. So sulat ng meeting, minutes of the meeting. Okay. So his account not just of the Teros but of the entire revolution. So it was written while he was imprisoned in 1904. So again, so let's look back into the date. How long was it since the date and the actual writing? So it was around 7 years, 1897. Okay. The other account was by Andres Bonifacio, Supremo of the He was the Supremo of the Katipunan. Then, so yung account niya was from a letter to Jacinto written 1 month after the convention. So it was, so mas maiksi, mas malapit. Therefore, the accuracies of the events mas magkakaroon ng credibility si Bonifacio. And we have also Santiago Alvarez. He was a participant and witness to the convention. So, yung account ni Alvarez was gained from the same document as the account earlier doon sa first cry. Okay, so medyo mas matagal din ng konti compared to again Bonifacio. So out of the three, the earliest written account was by Bonifacio. Okay, now more or less, if you've read the accounts in the module, diba, halos pareho lang naman ang mga nangyari, ang the events na transpired. But I would like to pay particular attention to Bonifacio's account. Kung titingnan ninyo, out of the three, yung kay Bonifacio ang hindi nagsabi na hindi siya nagalit. Hindi siya nagalit, pero hindi niya tinutukan si yung tumutol sa pagkaka-appoint niya, pagkaka-elect niya, sorry. Okay? Hence the importance of perspective na naman. Okay? Because of certain biases or certain perspectives, there may be certain actions that can be left out of an account. Okay, we cannot say for sure why. Halimbawa, kasi ayaw mong pakita na ganyan yung ugali mo, or yun nga, ayaw mong i-reveal na meron kang maling nagawa, or ano. Okay, but that can happen when we take perspective into account. Okay? Kasi again, you can see the clear difference between or among the three. Yung kay Bonifacio. Well, again, the major events, the major events that transpired. So, nandun sila. Medyo parallel naman sila. Okay? Pero very clear doon sa account ni Bonifacio na wala yung tinutukan niya ng baril ang tumutol. Sorry, nakalimutan ko yung pangalan ng tumutol. So yun. Kaya very important na makita natin yung perspective. Well, syempre, si Bonifacio yung uh, account niya yun eh. Di ba? So hindi niya bibigyan ng, well, there's a high chance na that the author, if the author is writing an account about himself, him or herself, di ba? He would not, well, most of the time, he would not say something bad. He would not reveal an action that he did which was, well, somehow hindi maganda, di ba? Or hindi ka nais-nais. Of course, again, we're not generalizing. Yung may ibang autobiographers pa rin naman na they tell all. Pero in this case, so wala yung part na yun. So again, we have to be wary of how perspective affects the presentation of the information. Okay? Bakit wala yun? Kasi ganito kasi yung perspective niya nagmamatter, di ba? So, ayan. Bakit ito ganyan yung sinasabi niya? Kasi ito yung pinanggagalingan niya. Okay? Because this is from his or her perspective. Okay? Now again, yun nga, because of certain perspectives can we disregard them as not true or can we regard them as not true? Okay? So again, unless they are proven to be false, so hindi natin pwedeng masabi na hindi sila totoo. Okay? For example, yung kay Bonifacio, because of that perspective, hindi na ba natin i-consider ang account niya? For the most part naman, nag-a-align naman ang mga sinabi niya. Di ba? Hindi, but we have to be conscious of the perspective. We have to be aware saan nang gagaling yung author ng account na kino-consider natin. Okay? Bakit ganyan yung mga pinipresent niya? Bakit mayroong mga simple differences? Okay? So, very important ang perspective. All right? Now, perspective, pero wag nating tingnan ang perspectives as mga harang from the truth. Okay? Much better if we look at perspectives as another way of looking at an event. So, kailangan open-minded tayo. So, dapat wag closed ang mind natin. Okay? When dealing with certain information. So we always have to be open. Okay? For example, pag nagturo akong ganyan, okay? Now, where am I pointing? 'Di ba? Kung nasa harap kita, you're going to say that I'm pointing to the right. Okay? Pero kung ako, I'm pointing to my left. 'Di ba? Now, magkaiba yung sagot. But mali ba ang isa? 'Di ba? Hindi, parehong tama. Okay? Yan yung analogy ng perspective, di ba? You're both saying what you're both saying is correct. Tama naman, di ba? It's just na tinitingnan natin ang isang event from different perspectives. Okay? That's why kapag mayroong nagkwento sa atin, pag mayroong nagbigay ng information sa atin, wag nating agad-agad sasabihin na mali ang sinasabi mo because hindi siya nag-a-agree sa kung ano yung alam mo or kung ano yung paniniwala mo. Okay? Because he or she is coming from a different perspective. Okay? That's why we look at the background of the author. We look into the author. Sino siya? Okay? Ano yung pinanggagalingan niya? Okay? to consider anong perspective meron siya. Okay? With regards doon sa information na pinipresent niya. Alright? Ang problema kasi minsan sa atin madalas, 'di ba? Sarado yung isip natin, 'di ba? We're only thinking na what we believe in or what we hold or what information we have, okay, that is the truth. Okay? Tapos pag mayroong nagsabi sa atin ng information that sometimes uh, tumataliwas or sometimes hindi siya nagmamatch, diba? Sinasabi na, hindi totoo yan kasi ganyan, ganyan, blah, blah, blah. Okay? So we have to be open. We have to consider always from what perspective is he or she or is the other person or is the author of the source coming from. Okay? So to summarize, so yun nga, so we always have to look into the background of the author and of the source. So again, bakit? Because by doing that, we get to determine the perspective, okay? Saan nanggagaling? Ano yung punto de vista ng author? Okay? It also helps in establishing the credibility. Okay? Halimbawa, nakita nga natin kanina that some sources were written a few years after the event happened. Okay? And again, ang problema dyan is uh, yung memory natin. Minsan medyo nagfa-fail ng konti. May mga certain details na medyo nakakalimutan natin. That's why as much as possible, we're looking for sources that were written as close as possible to the event itself. Okay? Uh, the manner of the presentation of the information is also important. Okay? Well, in the sense, it helps us determine ano ba yan? How truthful or how reliable can the source be? So again, if it's a journal, mas mapapaniwalaan natin if the information is presented more in a logical manner. Okay? Pagpakwento na kasi yan, there has, well, of course, for secondary sources, mas ano yung narrative style of writing because again, how are you going to engage your readers kung boring yung writing mo? Okay, how are you recreating the event in that sense, di ba? It has to be written narratively, but remember, we're talking about primary sources. If your source is not a novel or hindi siya dapat na nakasulat in a narrative format, okay, then you have to analyze more. You have to analyze properly the source. Again, we're not saying that it's not credible, but you have to be critical about your source, especially if it's in a manner of presentation na hindi akma sa type of source niya. Okay? And of course, again, in the end, what will tie it all together is our discussion on the perspective of the source. Diba? Saan nanggagaling yung author? Ano yung perspective niya? Again, we're not automatically discrediting that the source is or the author is or the information that the author is saying is not true. Okay? But we have to consider, we have to realize, uh, kailangan i-consider natin anong perspective meron ang author ng source natin. Okay? Kasi if we initially close our minds, 'di ba? Hindi na mag-grow, wala na tayong tatanggaping bagong information. Okay? So we always have to be open-minded, especially about information that is coming or that we are receiving. Okay? We have to always look into the background of the author, sino ba siya? Okay, we have to look how is the or how the information are presented. Okay, we have to look into the perspective where the author is coming from. Okay, in order for us to determine uh, how reliable is the information for us. Diba? How credible or how truthful can the information be? Okay? So again, background ng author, the importance again, background ng source, Okay? To establish the credibility, how the information is presented. So, kailangan tinitingnan din natin yan. Okay, and of course, we also have to look at the perspective of the author. Okay, so again, these are reminders on how we can better analyze the information that we are researching, information that is presented to us. Okay, and hopefully these reminders can help us in discerning, is the information truthful and is the information useful. Okay, so with that, thank you for listening. Hoping na you've learned something from our lecture. Okay, stay safe and stay happy.